so that nothing else comes through.
Well, there we go. We are live. Hey, everybody. It's me, Nat from Twiniversity. Happy whatever day of the week it is by you when you're watching this. Today, we have something that we really need to talk about. So there's been so many serious things going on in the universe these days, but this is something that directly affects us. So we got an email not too long ago because we kind of jumped on this as quickly as possible from our wonderful guest, Stephanie, who informed us that there is a new issue that arises in twins. Now, a lot of us are familiar with TTTS, which is twin to twin transfusion syndrome, which if you have monochorionic twins, and a single placenta, then, well, single placenta or whatever, that your twins could have an issue with having an equal distribution of all the goodness that your placenta provides to your twinnies. However, I had not heard of TAPS, and simply it's because it's fairly new to the twin game. It's only about 15 years ago that it was discovered, which in the span of the universe, of course, that is like yesterday. So when Stephanie offered to come and speak to us, I was like, okay, I'm calling you Steph, no matter what you think, Stephanie, too. No matter what, we need to educate the universe and let everybody know what TAPS is, what it means to us as twin families, and how we could possibly get the word out so that instead of, just knowing about TTTS, we know about TAPS, because you guys know sometimes it's us educating our own doctors, because not that we have bad doctors, it's just that we have such a special pregnancy and such a special situation that it's not crazy for us to say, hey, are we sure it's not this? So it's always good to lead any conversation, even if the doctor goes, oh, I totally know what that is. Don't worry about it. So Stephanie, welcome to the Twiniversity family. I hope you stay around for many, many, many years. But give us an inside scoop on what TAPS is, how it's important to you, and what we could do to get the word out.
Sure. Hey, Nat, first of all, thank you for having me. It was such a absolute joy to get the email back going, yes, we want to talk to you, because so many people are kind of like, we don't know what this is. So I was really excited. So a little bit about me. I'm an Australian who lives in the Netherlands, because that's not confusing for anyone at all. So I've lived here for 9 years. My girls were born here, and I have monochorionic twins, Emily and Matilda, who just turned 7 years old. Yeah, so 7 years ago, well, 8 years ago nearly, I found out I was pregnant with twins, and very excited, knew nothing about twins, the usual story, we don't have twins in our family, anything like that. And so I just blindly accepted everything that my doctor told me. And he said to me, oh, look, we'll have a conversation about the things that can go wrong. And one of the things that can go wrong is this thing called twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. But don't worry about it. You won't get it. It's fine. I was like, great. Okay, you're screening me. That's fine. And everything went really well till about 23 weeks. And then they found out that I actually had developed twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. So I was transferred to the next nearest hospital to me that deals with twins, and that is about an hour away from where I live in the Leiden in the Netherlands. Shout out to the LOMC who may be watching. Love you guys. Anyway, basically what happened was they scanned me. They found I had stage 1 twin-to-twin transfusion, but then they also found that there were indications of this other thing called TAPS happening. Now, didn't know a thing about it. The twin-to-twin transfusion actually resolved, but the TAPS progressively got worse. I ended up delivering my girls with stage 3 TAPS at 31 weeks. And they're now, they spent 5 and 6 weeks in hospital, and they're now 7. So it's great. They've done really well, progressed really well. So one of the things that actually drove my passion about TAPS was because when I was diagnosed, there was nothing out there about it. I was told it was a form of twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome by my local hospital, not to worry about it. But what the research shows us is that it's not actually a form of twin-to-twin transfusion. It all comes under this great big bracket, and I'll get really technical for 5 seconds, under this great big bracket of feto-fetal transfusion. So you have 3 things under there. You have twin-to-twin transfusion, you have TAPS, which is twin anemia polycythemia sequence, and then you have selective fetal growth restriction or intrauterine growth restriction depending on which part of the world you're in and which university you're affiliated with and all those technical parts. So with TAPS, TTS is caused by large connections in the placenta, and it's a rapid shift of blood from one baby to the other. TAPS is caused by really, really small connections in the placenta, and there's usually, depending on whether it's post-laser TAPS or spontaneous TAPS, because there's two forms. One happens after laser surgery for twin-to-twin. The other one actually happens on its own out of the blue. But there's around 2 to 4 connections in the placenta, and they're so small, they're basically like a piece of thread. And they're actually so small that only red blood cells move from one baby to the other. And it causes one baby to be really anemic, which has basically blood like rosé wine or Kool-Aid, those kind of things. And the other baby has really thick blood like ketchup. It causes a lot of problems. And unfortunately, routine screening guidelines around the world actually don't cover screening for TAPS, which is a real issue. There are some countries do, but a lot of countries don't. And with twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, there are physical signs which we know about. You can feel bigger, you can feel fluid retention. There are physical signs, but with TAPS, there are no physical signs. Because it happens so slowly, it gives the babies time to compensate, and so there's no fluid differences. It's pretty rare. It only happens in about 3 to 5% of monochorionic twins. Has been documented in both monoamniotic twins and dichorionic twins, but really, really, really isolated cases. But yeah, I think that's the basics of TAPS. The only way to actually detect TAPS in utero, or the most reliable way, is to do a special reading on the brain of the babies. And it's basically like a speed camera. It checks how fast the blood is going through the brain. So if it's going too fast, it's kind of like the readings come back really quickly, and so that means it's anemia. And if it's going too slow, then it comes back, and that means the blood's going too fast. The blood is too thick. And they check this reading and they compare the readings. And if there is a big difference, then this can be an indication of TAPS happening.
Okay, so now I don't know if you're looking at the comments, Stephanie, but we've had some moms here in the US that have been diagnosed with TAPS. So it's apparently more common than even I was aware of. And guys, I'm going to ask you a favor for all of you that are watching. Could you just comment, thanks for telling us something, give us a heart, because the more that you interact with this conversation, the more Facebook and YouTube will actually allow it to spread. And this is one of those things where it's not benefiting Twiniversity. I don't actually even care if you mention anything about us. We just need every twin parent to know, because as you could see, Melissa just commented that her babies had it, but it was not detected. This is an issue that the patient is going to need to lead a conversation. And having people like Stephanie in our corner, and knowing that there's the TAPS Foundation, the TAPS Support Foundation, which Julie just put a link in the comments as well. And Jewel,
thank you, Julie. Thank you.
Oh, Julie's the best. Jewel, could you make sure that it's up on YouTube as well? Because we're live over there. But you guys need to know that this exists. And if you are in a country that is, constantly testing for TTTS like ours does here in the US, you might have to say, hey, listen, could we do a fetal brain scan? Stephanie, how should moms and dads progress with that conversation? Like, what should they tell their doctor, and how do they convince them that more studies need to be done?
Yeah, look, I think it's really important that they do have the conversation, and it's just as simple as sitting down with your doctor. And when you're sitting in the conversation and you're being told that you're having monochorionic twins, your doctors will probably say, we will screen you for TTTS. And I say, you can actually just sit there and say, that's great. Tell me more about how you're going to screen for that. And what you really need is something called a mid-cerebral artery Doppler done. And that's the brain scan that I was talking about. So, and it's fairly routine. It can be done at your maternal fetal medicine or perinatologist office. If you go in and they say TTS, say, are you also screening me for TAPS? Because again, we need to remember that TAPS is not a form of TTS. It is a separate disease, has different diagnostic criteria, different long-term outcomes, different treatment options. So we need to broaden this conversation and say not only screening for TTS, because I think that may dilute the urgency of getting the screening. Wow, I can see the comments going off in the background. So yeah, basically what I would say is when you go in, ask, what are you screening me for? And then when they say, we're screening you for TTS, okay, are you also screening me for TAPS? No, if the doctor comes back and says, no, we don't do that because there's no proven treatment options or things like that, what you can do is actually say to them, well, there is treatment options. The screening protocols are actually much more refined than they were 15 years ago. We actually got a new staging system only 18 months ago, which has proven to be over 80% accurate, which is wonderful. So you can actually open the conversation and basically just say, look, are you screening me for TAPS? If you're not, look me up on Facebook. I'll send you all the data you need to get screened for TAPS. It's you can also contact the TAPS Support Foundation. It's really not a problem there. But open the conversation, ask them. And if they say, we don't do that, ask them why. And then say, do you know that there's 15 years of research?
Well, Stephanie, I have a question. First of all, we have Tara Lynn, who's part of our Twiniversity gang over there. There's a Facebook group for TAPS as well. So I do think that this is going to be one of those issues where support is going to be critical, because it's not only going to be support of what do I do now, it's going to be a support of how to have that conversation with my doctor. Perhaps you could ask other parents, what doctor did you go to that had, more knowledge of TAPS? So, Stephanie, another question I have for you is, you mentioned before that it could happen even after a TTTS surgery. Tell us a little bit more about that, because I think a lot of people who get diagnosed with TTTS think that, oh, we're out of the woods after surgery is done. What do we need to do after surgery, or what should we be looking for?
Absolutely. They still need to be performing those MCA Dopplers. And I mean, they really should be starting them. There's a few guidelines. We like to think of the ISUOG guidelines, which is the International Society of Ultrasound and Obstetrics and Gynecology. They have a fantastic set of guidelines, and they actually introduce routine MCA Doppler screening from about 16 weeks. Anywhere up to 20 weeks is fine. TAPS can happen anywhere in a pregnancy, though, unlike TTS, which kind of has a more common window. TAPS has actually been recorded anywhere from 15 weeks to 35 weeks. So it's really just important that you're getting that screening regardless of whether you have the surgery. But after surgery, they should be watching you. And it's particularly in the month after surgery that TAPS is most commonly detected. And what causes post-laser TAPS is when the connections are not correctly sealed. Sometimes there can be a rejoining of the vessels. We had recently in the Facebook group itself a case where the vessels actually rejoined, which is rare, but it happens. And it's usually little tiny connections on the outside margin of the placenta that do this. And so there is two laser techniques out there. There is selective laser ablation, which is the most common form. And then there's a second form, the Solomon laser technique. And Solomon laser is the one that is used to treat TAPS, but it also can reduce reduce TTS reoccurring and post-laser TAPS. What we suggest is that, talk to your doctor about Solomon laser technique if they use it to prevent post-laser TAPS happening. But it's really just a case of, as everything comes down to knowledge, skill, and education as well for doctors.
Now, Stephanie, this is going to be horrible, but I guess we need to talk about the negatives of a non-diagnosis. So what are, It's very unfortunate, right? Whenever we hear people say, "Oh, I hope it's twins," or "I always wanted a twin pregnancy," I think to the average bear, that's very exciting, and a lot of us know that it's wonderful being parents of twins, and we're very lucky to have our community with so much support. However, a lot of us know that it's a dangerous pregnancy, and so for me personally, while I have fraternal twinnies that were, very comfortable, my body was not able to really handle twins as much as I would have liked, or really anybody in my family would have liked. So there's so many complications, and I'm very fortunate with preeclampsia that we were able to get it early, and I am fine despite a pretty horrific delivery. My twinnies are growing despite their prematurity. They're 16 now. They're 800 years old is what I feel like. But what are some of the negatives if we don't know about TAPS? What are some things that that could happen?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's important to have this conversation as well. Unfortunately, with TAPS, there is a really high mortality rate for donor twins. So the anemic babies, they actually have a higher risk of of dying in utero or just after birth. And this is I hate talking about this because it's such a negative thing, but it is quite a high rate. One of the big differences with TAPS and TTTS is that the long-term outcomes are very different as well.
Mm-hmm.
With TTTS laser surgery, we've increased the survival rate of twins rapidly, and there is about a 9 to 11%. I think, I'm so sorry if I get that wrong. Someone correct me in the comments. But there is still about a 10% chance of some kind of delay or negative things happening. But with TAPS, that becomes quite high for donor twins,
Mm-hmm.
particularly spontaneous TAPS. And donor twins are actually at a 44% chance of cognitive delays.
Okay.
And then also there is a specific type of deafness that spontaneous TAPS twins are quite susceptible to. I'm sorry, I'm falling over my words. There's a 15% chance for donor twins to have a kind of deafness called auditory neuropathy spectrum disorder. I did slow down because I usually blur that together and muck it up. But there is a high chance of that happening for donor twins. It's about 15%. So 1 in 8 donor twins can be born deaf, which is really quite shocking. And this is something that's actually not been recorded in anemic TTTS twins or in another disease that causes anemia in babies, which is the rhesus disease or alloimmunization. Those babies are not actually susceptible to that. And my gosh, I've got so many questions coming in.
Yeah, it's really fantastic. And I would say too that for those of you that are watching, I'm doing this for a few years now, right? So this is going to be our 12th year of Twiniversity, which is really, really exciting. And I'm honored to lead this charge, right? But the thing is I'm going to tell you, I'm seeing a significantly higher incidence of IB twins. Usually, when I taught Twiniversity classes 10 years ago, it would be the majority would be fraternal twins. And so in Twiniversity classes, especially if you guys ever take a live class, we go around and we say, hey, what type of twins are you having? Do you know the genders? And we often tell people to kind of match up with other people that are in the live class. Once upon a time, we were doing this in locations throughout the country, but now online, we're still doing the same. And so, Stephanie, I'm noticing like a significant increase in identical twins. And perhaps it is because of the IVF single embryo transfer situation going on, but people are finding us, and I'm really glad that they are, but I know that this is a conversation that needs to be had. Steph, one of the questions that came up is, and Tara Lynn did answer, but if you're watching this, you're not going to be able to see the comments perhaps. How quickly does TAPS develop, or is it kind of a slow progression?
It's a really slow progression, and I actually have some fun statistics planned on this one. So, Melissa, I can see you asked this question. Basically, what happens is that it's a really slow process. It happens not over a period of hours. Like TTTS can happen in hours, we know this. TAPS happens in days and weeks. It's a slow progression. It's literally about 5 to 15 milliliters of blood that transfer from the donor twin to the recipient twin each day. And if you think that the average blood transfusion for a 29-week baby is actually 15 milliliters,
Okay.
that's kind of gives you a perception of how much it is. And for technical terms, 15 milliliters is about half an espresso or half a shot, depending on which way you go. And as twin parents, we go either way. So,
Or
but yeah,
both.
or both. Yeah, whatever floats your boat. But this is such a small amount of blood, and it happens progressively. And they're one of the reasons they think that there is a lack of fluid discordance is because it happens so slowly that this the donor baby compensates and the recipient baby compensates. And anyone who has a pair of TAPS twins knows how stubborn that donors can be. And this really shows in utero. I was talking with one of the researchers last night, and I was saying they need to do a study into how stubborn donors are because they really are quite resilient. But yeah, it is a slow progression. The other thing is too is that there are cases that are missed at birth, and I think this is really important to know. As the babies get bigger, though, the readings on the mid-cerebral artery or the MCA Doppler readings can become more inaccurate, and that's because the baby is head down, the positioning is wrong. So it's really important that they do the checks, and if the one is off, to check again in a couple of days just to make sure.
Okay, now Stephanie, what do we do? What do we do? How do we get this out? If there's people that are watching right now that are the big cheeses of their local twins club, how do we get this information out to the universe to help as many people as possible?
Okay, well, big cheeses. I like you. First of all, what we need to do is we just need to start talking about TAPS. And that's when someone approaches your local club or anything like that, talk to them about screening. But it starts really fundamentally at making sure that you get the right screening throughout your whole pregnancy. And it's not only limited to TAPS screening. Like, I can talk all day about TAPS screening, but we need to, early on, establish what kind of twins you're having. There is a big difference in care protocols for dichorionic and monochorionic twins to start with. You should be referred to a maternal fetal medicine specialist, regardless of what kind of twins you're having, so they can actually stand this up. Then you need to be checking that every 4 weeks, every 2 weeks for monochorionic twins. I'm sorry, I'm really unfamiliar with dichorionic twins. I apologize, but my life is identical twins. So, but yeah. So you need to be checking that every 2 weeks, and this is supported by international guidelines. Every 2 weeks, having your fluids checked, making sure that the deepest vertical pocket or the max vertical pocket, whichever terminology they use, is checked, and it stays between 2 and 8 centimeters for the babies. Making sure that they check for the bladders and just checking that they're there and they're present. Checking the umbilical cord flow to make sure the placenta is happy, because you've got 2 babies sharing an organ that's only designed for one baby. And this is so important. That placental health really affects. Know where your cord insertions are, because again, this helps the development of the babies. Make sure they're checking growth every 4 weeks. And possibly my one favorite thing in the whole world to talk about is make sure you are getting the mid-cerebral artery, the MCA PSV, which is, the peak systolic velocity, checked every 2 weeks. And that is for TAPS. And then also check that your team is up to date on the other signs of TAPS in utero, because things like the bright placenta, on the donor side, there is an enlarged heart for donors, and recipients can have this wonderful thing called a starry sky liver, which is really, it's a liver with bright flecks in it, and it looks like Van Gogh's starry sky night. So this is all the things that they need to be checking for. And it's as simple as, when you are diagnosed with having twins, walk in and have this conversation with them and say, what are you checking me for? And do you check me for this? And if they don't, you can ask them why. It's okay to challenge. It's really okay.
And it's okay to go for a second opinion.
Absolutely. That was my next point. Second opinions rock. You need to get that second opinion.
So many people are so hesitant because they don't want to offend anybody, but this is not a time where we have to be nice girls and boys. You need to become a parent before you're even a parent. You have to start being the
Yeah.
advocate not only for your babies but of your little fetuses that are growing
Yes.
inside of you. So Steph, what we do is if we have a doctor, let's say hypothetically, we go to the doctor's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Taps, isn't that music that they play in the military? So that could certainly, or Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts here in the U.S. So
In
do we?
Australia too.
Okay, good, got it. So if we go to tapsupport.com, will our doctors be able to get any information that they need as well?
Yeah, we can actually definitely talk to doctors. We target our website more towards helping people advocate and talking about the screenings that they need and things like that. But doctors can also contact us because we actually are connected with some of the leading researchers in the world. So we can put you in contact with them and you can discuss like diagnostic criteria. We try and keep a resource as well for our parents within our Facebook group, but also on the website. We make sure that we link to papers. Everything that we have on our website is verified. We have links. We support the information with evidence. And that's one of the things that we're really passionate about is making sure that as research moves, we're like one step behind it.
Mhm.
To the point where I may have been harassing one of the researchers for a paper for about 3 months. I knew it had been accepted, but it hadn't been published. But this is a really important paper that we needed.
Well, I
But we make sure that we move.
I absolutely am honored that you played with us, especially with the time zone fun stuff that's going on. So I really really appreciate it, and I see Becky just now, or Bethany actually put up another link too. So there is a lot of information, and
Yeah,
for those of you that are part of our team and part of the TAPS community, if you guys are willing to tell your personal story, if you could email us at community@twiniversity.com, we will happily publish any personal essays with bits and pieces. And Stephanie, I know we're going to work a lot more together too. We really really
absolutely.
need to make sure that this conversation keeps going. And I would rather, in general, as I say all the time, I would rather everybody overreact 100% of the time than underreact once.
Yep,
So
I fully support that. I really
oh,
do. I think it's really important that, even if you push, and it's like I keep telling people, it's okay to push. They're your babies. It's your
mhm.
body. They're your babies. You need to advocate for them because they don't have a voice yet.
Oh, and when
You're
they
their
do,
voice.
it'll be
Oh, yeah.
loud and cranky, and you'll be like, What happened, these
Oh
kids?"
my
Well,
gosh,
you're
yeah.
so your
I
20s, they're up there now. How has it been? Like, what have you seen any issues from their taps, rear its head later on down the line?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's really important to talk about here is some of the long-term effects. And my twins are spontaneous taps, so we do have some of the long-term effects that have happened. And one of the big things that we've found recently is my donor twin has what's called a developmental coordination disorder. We actually thought she had ADHD. It's not. She can't sit still. It's actually a diagnosis. But she has that. We also found out recently both my girls have autism, again, related to TAPS, either directly or indirectly. But having said that, they're happy, they're healthy, they're amazing kids who are so resilient. And, my donor twin, we were just talking about they won't shut up. Well, my donor twin didn't speak till she was 4, but she certainly has made up for that in the past few years. So she quite thinks. But again, one of the other things to do is that I'm really needing to talk about is that if you have had types twins in the past, it's really important to get long-term follow-ups for them. So important. There is a recommendation, but it's not an official recommendation, that you get them checked for developmental delays but at ages 2, 3, 5, and 8, and
Okay.
further on if needed. Get hearing testing for donor twins. This is all really important to talk about as well, because this small community of babies is actually really badly affected, and they do need to have that follow-up so that we can get early intervention.
It's fascinating of how few people follow up. They think that once the babies are breathing fresh air and they're home from the hospital, unless there's something
Yeah.
that's staring you in the face, people often ignore a lot of things. And I think Stephanie too, and as a twin parent, sometimes you just get lost in the shuffle and you're just like, well,
Oh gosh.
is this typical
Yeah.
behavior? Is this just what
Yeah.
twins do? So it's
Yeah.
I love the timeline that you gave of when we should
Yeah.
have our rechecked.
Definitely. And look, I think one of the most important things to talk about too is that there's a recent study that came out that suggests that monochorionic twins in particular should be checked regularly for neurodevelopmental impairment anyway, because they are there is so much prematurity and related issues. And this is really important: is follow your instinct. They talk about mummy gut or mummy instinct.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And do not be afraid to push. And unfortunately, I'm speaking from a lot of experience there. It took nearly 7 years it took nearly 6 years for me to get someone to listen to me about my kids. And this is just an absolutely fantastic point. Birth is not a cure to TAPS. Birth is not a cure to anything. This is one of the common comments that comes out, is that, once they're out, it's over. It's only the beginning. And
Gosh.
yeah,
Oh my gosh. It's so unfortunately true, but listen, we didn't necessarily sign up for everything that we get, but you just got to be thankful for what you have. Stephanie, thank you so
exactly.
much for playing with us today. We're gonna try to get the word out as much as possible. Tara Lynn, please send us a direct message of how we could get in touch with you too. And yeah, I would love more stories about TAPS, and we're going to try to get everything out there as we can. And if you guys have any questions for Stephanie or for me, you could email us directly at twiniversity.com, or you could send us a direct message literally anywhere. And we have the best people in the universe that will make sure that Stephanie gets all the questions that you guys have. So, Steph,
And I
you're
would
just beginning your
love,
day, or you're
yeah.
ending your day. Where are you? I never
No,
really understand.
I'm actually just outside of Amsterdam. I'm in a place called Almere, which is like about 20 minutes outside of Amsterdam. So it's currently just after 4:30 in the afternoon for me.
Not bad. Okay, good. It's much better than if you were in Australia or New Zealand. So
Oh
yeah.
gosh, yes.
We've done
I would
we've
be
done
asleep.
those wonderful interviews too. But yeah, our international community is really impressive at Twiniversity, and something that I would have never expected in a million years. So yeah, we're gonna do what we can. Steph, we really promise at Twiniversity. I vow personally as Nat, the big cheese over here, that we're gonna do what we can to make sure that every expectant twin parent knows what TAPS is, and we will help expedite anything that we possibly can. So thank you so much, Stephanie.
No, and thank you, Nat, for having me. It's been such a privilege. I'm so excited. And yeah, like Nat said, if anyone has questions, send them through to her. I will get them. I will answer you personally. I can set up a call, whatever you need. We can talk about it.
You are the best. All right, Steph, say goodbye to the universe.
Bye, universe. Bye, everyone. Thank you for listening to me.
You got it. See you later, alligators. Thanks for watching.
Yay.